I'm envious of this wonderful next book from Dennis E Bolen, who has traveled all the way from Victoria to be here tonight on the hallowed boards of Drunken Fiction. Dennis, welcome. No plot spoiler, but I will say I read Dennis's book and I have a review of it out on the Seaboard Review. I encourage you to pick up a copy, not just because you're supporting, but because you will probably enjoy it. So take it away, Dennis.
He drove steady to the thistlebound town. He drove steady. He drove, but he allowed himself a pause before the display window of the last women's wear shop in the town. It stood dark. He had passed it 100 times and often felt compelled to gaze at the now forlorn and semi-clothed mannequin. The afternoon sun off the sidewalk gave her face a pale glow. Today the light even touched her saddened limbs, and he saw that one arm was nearly coming away from the hole. There seemed significance in the assemblage, but he didn't know what it was. Striding away, he knew that this was something he would not likely return to see. He drove because such relative ease it was to drive deserted rocky highway. Blessed vibration from stones through rubber tire, up tie rods and steer column to vertebra and scapulae along metacarpal to distal phalanx and skull, a balm this truck had always given him. That breed of power plant is an efficient and finely comprised piece of pragmatic engineering designed to afford you maximum freedom of movement and employability. It fills a need integral to human progress, particular to this continent. It'll move a sizable general cargo. It'll run on the most basic gasoline. It has a heater to keep you warm and ventilation enough to let wind swirl from the windows to keep you cool. Ditches and sloughs either side accommodate flights of every duck and migratory bird to launch into infinite fetches up and out to oblivion aside your continued western lamb. He drove steady because the thought of just picking up and driving out in your own personal vehicle for parts little known, no particular schedule, fate dictating every single day, even for a little while it would suit one man or another at some part of his life. But just remember stuff, kid. Hang on to the things you see and the people you meet and the times you have. There'll be dark days, but there's always going to be light too. By the looks of what you've done so far, you might always have an interesting life. You're the envy of every decent man. Because there's no reason for a reasonable man to put up with living out here. Sure, the crops come in when you plant them, mostly, and the weather might let you bring in a profit 2 years out of 3 normally, but you know yourself, the dust will choke the breath out of you. The winter's long enough to make you forget there's any other season. Any place on the planet that requires a man to string a line from his front door to the outhouse so as when you gotta go you don't get lost in the blizzard, or the pitch blackness at night where you can't see your feet on the ground, isn't fit for human habitation. So he drove steady, but the truck bottomed on a particular high point of jagged boulder and a sound came up that was out of place. The blackness of a 40-weight fluid pool widened under the front end. Not disposed toward profanity, he struggled now to contain at least a despairing cuff of the forehead or a fruitless throwdown of his hat. Even before grabbing the toolbox or fixing the jack or plotting any kind of plan, he sat upon the running board and let grief convene a 5-minute summit in his heart. Pure regret of an unknown and surprising intensity demotorized him in a way he'd never experienced, and had him head in hands near sobbing in the afternoon sun, alone on a roadway so far gone and unused, it felt like he was the last boy on earth. He drove steady to a raging forest fire where occasional moments of relief came when passing the hose companies, who would immediately train their misting nozzles at the machine and the men upon it. But as they moved mid-hill, the heat was of a type that at once paradoxically improved air quality, but raised the surface temperature of the metal they depended upon to points impossible to touch even with heavy glove protection. He wondered at what stage he would lose his grip on calm and leap running from the fire. At the worst moment, the two crew huddled in the lee of the driver, away from the fireside, so as he furiously drove the carving blade into the earth and downward toward a lakeside that mercifully now could briefly be seen through the live treetops and ghosting flame. He drove steady, restarting the truck, and pulled a right turn toward where he'd once been set loose to run play on beaches. The morning air was nearly too chill, so he cranked the window up to just an inch or so to let the new air swirl about. He drove steady and then strode solitary into the dead vehicle assemblage, and right away received a sensation of being the privileged entrant to some kind of multi-era, majestic, mechanized museum. Mottled cars and trucks of every rusting character were on paint-peeled display. A whole history of the world he scarcely knew was galleried in the vast random alloy amalgam. He observed the phases of decrepitude and the various variations of how surface greenery clambered up and into some vehicles and others not. Wafting scents of earth-melded oil, haphazard features of glass, and everywhere the suggestion of painful mortality was leavened by yawning invitations to be fascinated.
Dennis, you're a pro at reading. It's so great. It's I often think John Travolta was questioned once about being on stage, and his advice was, when you're on the stage, take the stage. And I think that's good advice for all us writers and readers to be. Dennis, you took the stage. Thank you.
This is show business.
Show business, baby. Show business. Can you talk to us, some reflections, some thoughts, some words of wisdom about this envy piece that we writers suffer from at times?
I think it was it Mordecai Richler, who I was very privileged to meet one time. He's on record as having said that you will never find writers at another writer's feet unless they were knocked there. It's writing being such a solitary activity. I noticed on Facebook people like to write 5 pages and then just announce that they just couldn't fill 5 pages. It's ridiculous. Please stop doing this.
I'm a fan, actually, that people are like, I have just had an idea for a trilogy, a 1,000-page fantasy. My friend and I just sketched out the first 7 chapters. Stay tuned.
You do not choose writing. Writing chooses you. Writing is an affliction, and you just have to live with it. If you're writing, then damn well write, and don't blab about it. Just the blabbing you do is in this, between these covers here. That's where the art is. That's why I never announce myself when reading. Thank you very much for that compliment. Yes, when reading, it bores me to tears to have people do a 5-minute introduction to a 90-second poem. So all you'll ever get from me is the performance. And it's actually quite a thrill for me to be standing up here and BSing like I am right now.
Well, I will say, I want to point out a moment in the book that I really, really loved. And I grew up in what my mother used to call the Ozarks of Ontario, where there's a lot of poverty, and some people were related more than one way. And my parents were hippies, and they really lived up to the dirty hippie part of dirty hippies. Wow, our place was a mess, just a mess. I loved them. It was great. It was a wonderful upbringing in a lot of ways. But the backyard was littered with the carcasses of old vehicles. So there was a 1950 something Ford, a red Ford, cherry red with running backs, and there was a Chevrolet a little later, a little older than the Amaranthine one. And you mentioned in this car lot where old cars have been parked and they're sort of parked by their type. I think it was tungsten. You mentioned the smell of tungsten.
Yes.
There's something about the smell of an old molding car that's a little sweet and a little cloying and fascinating.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah. There is. I mean, I grew up in terrible, awful mill towns on the west coast of Vancouver Island, and there's always a dead car lot somewhere. And the minute you walk onto this area, especially if they've been stacked up together and the fluids inside haven't been completely drained, they're sort of leaking down into the ground, there's a distinctive smell that oil, once it's mixed with soil, makes, and it lingers in the air. And it really is the smell of a wrecking yard. It's there's nothing else that compares to it, actually, or maybe a printing shop. I'm told that a printing shop smells different. But yeah, that's what I went for in this book. And I might as well confess, several characters that appear in this book are real people. And the guy, like the boy is traveling across the country, and he has need to go to a wrecking yard at a certain point. And the character he meets there is a friend of mine, actually. His name's Clint. And Clint's words about the utility of the pickup truck is in my reading. It's quite a philosophy.
That's great. All right, Dennis E Bolen, everyone. Please pick up a copy of his book. He came from far away to be with us.